Hello, huddlers, and welcome to another Career Huddle where we introduce you to best-selling authors who can help propel your careers to new heights. Today, our very special guest is Stan Phelps. Stan Phelps is a TEDx speaker, certified speaking professional, virtual master presenter, and the founder of StanPhelpsSpeaks.com, a speaking and training consultancy. Stan is the best-selling author of 18 books in the Goldfish series, including Silver Goldfish, the book, yay, there it is, the book we will be covering in our conversation today. So hello, Stan. How are you and where are you?
I'm doing good, Drew, and great to see everyone. Thank you all for sharing your cameras. That's awesome. I've got the Brady Bunch up in front of me. So I'm coming to you from my studio, which is in Cary, North Carolina. So we're a suburb of Raleigh, and if you're not familiar with Cary, it stands for the containment area for relocated Yankees.
Yes, exactly. Well, and the whole RDU area, the Raleigh-Durham area, has become amazing. And I get a kick out of going there every time and just finding another great restaurant to eat at. It's amazing. Can we go back to your full studio mode for a second?
Sure.
So as a professional speaker and virtual speaker, I just want the folks looking at this to just sort of admire. You've got two cameras. You've obviously got a switcher. You've got a switcher that can go remote like that. Is that three cameras?
That's three cameras. Yeah.
Three cameras. And then occasionally you'll use the background for slides if you're doing, say, accompanying slides. So it allows you actually to use it like a board, right?
Yeah, I can do full slides. Yeah.
And I also have to acknowledge that your sound is really good. What are you using for sound?
I use a Shure SMB SM7B,
Okay.
which is it's a nice directional mic, so I don't
Right.
have to be right up against it.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas the mic I have, I do need to be close to it to get the full resonance. But does that go through an amplifier, Stan?
Because I run everything through my switcher.
Right.
Actually, I apologize. That doesn't go through the switcher. I run it through into the computer via USB.
Oh,
So there's
okay.
like a device that
Right.
translates it.
Got it. Okay. All right. Enough of the technical stuff. But I bring that up because a speaker can blow it, particularly a virtual speaker. If your sound is bad, if your lighting is bad, if your camera is bad, if your set is bad, all those things could be bad. Obviously, as a professional, yours are really good, as one would expect. So let's start with, I know you travel the globe giving speeches on a lot of topics, including how to deliver memorable business presentations.
Right.
Let's add a little levity to this topic. Share a story, perhaps the worst surprise you've had when giving a presentation and how you recovered.
Wow, it's a great question. So a number of years ago, I was up in Canada, outside of Calgary, in the mountains at a resort called Kananaskis. And it was this beautiful mountain resort. I'm probably 15 minutes into a 90-minute program, maybe 250 people in this big ballroom. And I'm like mid-sentence, and it's like a blackout. Power goes out, slides are gone. My mic is obviously gone. And it's like, what do you do? And I've always found it, you can never rely on just your slides. One, you have to know your stuff, but I always will have in my jacket pocket kind of the progression of my talk, Drew. And so I just simply reach into my pocket, kind of, just pulled out a card that kind of had all of the progression, and I just continued on. I had to amplify my voice a little more. And probably about 10 minutes later, the power came back on. But that was, I got to tell you, first and last time that's happened to me. I've also had fire alarms in the middle, but that one stands out as like a classic. Oh my gosh.
And, in your book, there is a point where you do talk about sort of preparing for the unexpected. And that's certainly one of the worst, because you suddenly no longer have visual support. You no longer have audio support. And I don't know about you, and a lot of the folks here, but I tend to use the slide because I put very little copy on the slides when I give a speech. And if I don't see those words, I don't know where I am. So just the idea of having the headline of every slide on a card in your pocket. Yeah, that's just
Yeah, and or sometimes I do it like a band would do a set list,
right.
and sometimes I have it actually on the ground, just like a band would, so I can kind of reference where I am in the presentation, what's coming up.
The Stan Phelps set list. I wonder if I could get that on Alexa. But also to that point, and that's one of the things that enables you to do too, is if you're running out of time or you need to stretch things, it allows you, because you're sort of think of that playlist as a modules, right? So
Right.
you use that. So that gives you another advantage in that you can sort of speed it up if you needed to.
Absolutely.
So in your book, you sort of break the topic down into three sections, which I know was part of the formula of Goldfish: the why, the what, and the how.
Right.
The why may seem obvious, but let's put that in the context of being a CMO. Why is it so important that CMOs become better presenters?
Well, I think not just better presenters, but better communicators,
Right.
Drew.
Right.
And we talk about in the book, and it's not my quote, it's by George Bernard Shaw. He said the biggest myth in communication is the idea that it actually happened. Finishing the presentation to your team or in your organization or to an external audience, that's not the goal of being a great communicator. It's really, being able to communicate your message in a way that engages people and inspires them to action. And I think if any CMO, that's really a big part of what their skill is setting the focus, engaging, and motivating towards a call to action.
Right. So we're moving some ball forward somewhere as a presenter, as a communicator. And the interesting part of this is that I think particularly in internal meetings, we try to communicate too much.
Mm.
Right. I think that just happens all the time. And in the book, you state communications occur when the audience can repeat your message in their language. Well, if you give them 50 things to remember, they're not going to be able to do it. So, which is why it's so common. Let's talk a little bit about that notion, because we know, like in the old days, we used to do TV commercials and we had to narrow
Right.
an idea down to 30 seconds. And if you worked on Procter and Gamble, you had 3 words: smell is proof of clean. And as long as we showed someone smelling the towel, we could sort of communicate the idea of Gain detergent. Well,
Right.
that was simple. We were all trained way a long time ago how to do that, but we don't think about that when we're doing longer presentations internally. I'm specifically thinking about that because that is probably the place where CMOs can have the greatest impact, but may not. So let's just talk about this idea of being able to repeat the message.
Yeah. And I think it starts with you have to have a singular objective. If anybody remembers that great movie, this in City Slickers, when Billy Crystal's asking Jack Palance, what's the secret of life? And he raises his finger and he goes, one thing. And he's like, your finger? No. He's like, that's what you need to figure out is your one thing. And I would say that's the exact same challenge. What's the central idea and the message you want to convey? And again, success is the ability of that audience to be able to relay back that message in their own language, not exactly yours. And so too many times we have kind of the curse of knowledge and we want to pack as much as we can. Again, I think there's a magic number of the things that you can pack into a presentation, but it really starts with what's that one thing, that central idea and objective?
What is the limit, by the way, that you can pack into a presentation?
Well, I'll give you the quiz. I mean, do you remember watching Schoolhouse Rock when you were growing up? There
I
is a
do.
magic number. Do you know what the magic number? 3 is the magic. Yes, it is, Drew. It's the magic number. And so as you think about things that support that central idea, don't ever think about doing 10 things, right? Your audience at best is going to remember 3. And to me, that's the, as you break down that central idea, you want to be thinking about 3 things max.
Yes, I remember your advice on which I ignored a little bit on the CATS framework, because that's actually for courage, artful, thoughtful, and scientific. But because CATS is sort of a memorable thing, I thought I could get away with it. So broke the rules a little bit. But one of the things that I wonder, and this would be a really interesting test for CMOs, when you're doing a presentation to your team,
right?
Take 10 minutes at the end and ask them to play back what they heard. Or do one-on-ones or something, but really challenge yourself, I think, to figure out, are you communicating the one thing with the 3 layers underneath it, right? It's one big idea, 3 things underneath it that support of it. I'm thinking of on the case for case paper, reliable, resourceful, responsive. I just won't forget it because it's easy, simple, and those are the 3 pillars. You can have any conversation with any employee at case paper and they can play those back for you. Okay, so I got to ask about glossophobia. Never seen that word before. It was in the book. What is it? Who suffers from it? And how do we fix it?
Oh man, it's glossophobia is the fear of public speaking. And who suffers from it? Have you ever seen these studies, Drew? They ask people what their greatest fear is. Public speaking is by far number 1. Number 2 is death.
Wow, that's quite a list.
And Jerry Seinfeld does an entire bit about it. He says, think about it. If you go to a funeral, that means more people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. And here's the thing. We all suffer from it. Mark Twain, this is attributed to Mark Twain, but I could see it as a Mark Twainism. He said there's only 2 types of public speakers. He says those that are nervous and those that are liars. and the reason why we have that fear is our brain has evolved to detect threats in the environment. And it can't tell the difference between a threat to our identity and an actual threat to our life. And so here's the thing. Again, if you're not nervous, either it's a sign that you don't care or you're a sociopath. So it's just a matter of with any type of skill, the more that you do it, the more you kind of build up that ability to know you're going to get through it and the confidence that comes along with it.
Yeah, it's like those 4-foot putts. You could get the jitters and go, oh, or you can just stand up there and do it because you've done it so many times. So a lot of the book is about is sort of you bring it down to this very simple notion of being loud and being clear. Mm-hmm. And that's such a profound and simple notion that presenting is about being loud and clear. Let's talk about the loud part and what you mean by you have the word impress in there as I think the first up under loud.
Yeah, under loud. And by the way, so loud and clear, believe it or not, comes from the military. Because when they were doing, my dad was in the Signal Corps in the U.S. Air Force. And when they did radio communication, Drew, you were always trying to gauge how you were coming across, how the signal was being picked up. And the 2 measures that they always looked was volume and clarity. And so they actually had a scale for it. And if you were perfect, you were coming back 5 by 5, which is shorthand for what we all refer today as loud and clear. And so loud, as we related in the book, is not about volume, because we're going to assume people that can hear you. But loud is about keeping their attention and keeping them engaged so they can receive the message. And you pick the most critical thing. It starts with what we call impress. And the way our brain has evolved is that we make very quick judgments in a split second about anyone we come into contact with. And so you have to realize before you get up to speak, Drew, people are making assessments about you. And so the three things we talk about in the book that you can control is, one, who is introducing you and what are they saying? Two, how you're dressed, right? And lastly, you control what the first words are out of your mouth. And those are the three main things I tell people to focus on, because again, people are going to make that judgment. And the way our brain works is we then start to look at things to confirm that initial bias or judgment.
We're making that instantaneous fight or flight decision. We're looking at the speaker. You're wearing a sports coat. You got a pin. You have a professional background. You're well lit, and your sound is good. So you must be a speaker. You know, I mean, you're a presenter. It's just starting there. What you wear sends a story. How you stand and hold yourself.
Yeah, and I think as it comes to your dress, one, you want to dress for the audience. And some would say you need to make it at least a tie for what the audience is going to be in, or maybe a little bit above what the audience is. Two, you need to dress for your personal brand. So like I'm a goldfish guy, so I've got the pocket square, I've got the pin, right? That's just me and my brand. I love it. And you also, the last part is you just need to dress to be comfortable when you speak. You know, don't put yourself in clothes that you're going to feel awkward or, you know, not comfortable in.
So we've got the clothes that make us feel like, okay, we belong up there. We're ready to go. Talk about the first words again and why that's so important. Because I know when the way I get through the jitters in any speech when I'm giving one is I rehearse that first line over and over and over again so that I know I'm going to get, you know, be able to, and usually it's a story or an intro into a story, but let's talk about it, because one of the things you mentioned, so often people will say, I'm the first, you know, the first words out of their mouth is, I'm the last thing between you and lunch, or before I get started, let's do some housekeeping. Or
I love that. Before I get started, it's like you've already started.
Yeah, too late.
Or
get going.
Or I'd like to thank so-and-so for having me here. No one wants to hear that. They didn't come for you to thank everyone. You're doing that out of nerves, which I totally get. But to your point, I tell people you need to know the first 6 words out of your mouth. And ideally, you talked about story. That's a way to grab people straight away. And when you get up and you start to say these nonsensical things, you know, I have a coach, and he said he was working with somebody and they got off the stage, and he said to the coach, I think I lost them at some point during the presentation. And my coach looked at the person and goes, I think you're making an assumption there that you actually had them, right? Because again, people are going to make an assumption like, do I want to listen to this guy? Or look, I got this right in my pocket that I can discreetly pull out. And I think it's even harder when you're virtual.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. And one of the things I like about starting with a story is, particularly it's a story that's fun and self-deprecating, and one that I get comfortable in the course of telling that story. I get relaxed because I'm into that thing, and I can watch the audience sort of wait and be with me. So, okay. So we're starting strong. And let's just see, is there anything else that we want to talk about? What about connect and the unintentional? Oh, we talked about the like non-words. This is one that sort of drives me crazy. It takes a lot of practice. It really does, to get rid of those non-words.
Do you know what your filler word is, Drew?
I have a lot of them. I have a lot of them. Slip in every once in a while. And I'm sure when I also have there was one, there's a lot. And,
So mine is so. So my coach would look at me and he'd go, like from Seinfeld, he'd go, no so for you.
no.
But we all have it. And the reason why we develop those is because when we're in conversation, Drew, and I'm not finished communicating, I want to give you an indication that something's going to follow. So we create these filler words.
Right.
Well, think about it. When we're speaking, there's no interruption and there's no need for it, but we've developed that as a habit. And so one of the techniques we talk about in the book, and by far, there's 65 tips in the book. This is by far the best tip in the entire book. If you want to become a better speaker in terms of eliminating filler words, if you want to be more engaging, if you want to maintain eye contact, if you want to maintain your composure, all you have to do is one thing. And that one thing is to stop. And I'm a big acronym guy. So STOP is simply an acronym for single thought, one person. And the simple thing is when you come up and you're talking to an audience, you look at somebody in the audience and you deliver a single thought. Like I'm looking at Ray right now. I deliver a single thought to Ray. Here's the thing. I can't begin speaking again, Drew, till I look at someone else. Now I'm looking at Laura and I deliver a single thought to Laura. Now, what is really awkward is those little spaces we don't typically feel comfortable with. But here's the thing, when we're in the audience and we've said something, especially if it's important, it's like a good comedian knows to put that pause in there to let it sink in with the audience. And so that one single technique, single thought to one person, allows you to breathe between both. It forces you to get eye contact. It eliminates all of those filler words, the ums, the ands, the so's, and it slows you down. Because especially in the beginning, I don't know about you, Drew, but when I speak in the beginning, I feel like I'm like on a roller coaster and I can't slow it down. And this just forces me to breathe, which is super important, and really be measured. And I think it's so important, especially if you say something of consequence, to be able to embrace that pause.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm thinking of rhetoric right now, and sometimes that's why great speakers often repeat what they just said too. They might use a phrase more than once, just to bring home the thought and emphasize it, but also to avoid the non-words. And so I find what I have to do often is put the word stop or pause. Obviously, at the top of every page, if I have a script, sometimes I will put stop, pause, breathe, anything I can do to get myself to do it, because the natural tendency is I've got 40 slides, I've got 40 minutes, let's go.
Right.
And to slow yourself down. And part of that, I think, is going back to earlier, if you liberate yourself and saying, I'm not trying to communicate 50 things, I'm trying to communicate one big idea, maybe 3 components of that idea, and then reinforce it with illustrations, right? If you recognize that you're not trying to, communicate, there was a non-word, communicate so many different things, it puts less pressure on you to accelerate through it. Is that a fair assumption?
It's absolutely fair. And I'll also tell you what it stops you having to do is to memorize what you're saying, or think about what you're saying while you're saying the thing that you're currently saying, if that makes sense. Because in that little bit of pause, your brain works pretty fast. You can formulate what you're going to say next. And the main thing is, in that pause, you can also engage the room and be more present and in the moment. Because if you've been in a great room with a speaker, it feels more like a conversation and a dialogue because they're with you for the majority of that. There may be times where I'm going to tell you exactly how it is and it's non-negotiable. And there may be times, Drew, where I'm in my own head and I'm saying something that's really personal. But boy, the rest of the time you want to feel like you're present and connected to the audience.
And so I'm thinking about CMOs presenting to boards. I'm thinking about CMOs presenting to cross-functional teams. And the tendency is, again, because it's an internal presentation, that you're thinking about, okay, we got to get 50 things across, right? And so there's a lot more information and there's an acceleration. So what I'm thinking here and proposing for our community is record yourself using Zoom, count your non-words and count your pauses. And I think what you'll discover is you have very few pauses that you think you had more, and you have a lot more non-words to fill it in. So, and it takes nothing. It's so easy to practice on a Zoom. You hit record, start meeting, and you can see it. Any other advice in that area?
And I would also give you this homework that the next time that you're listening, I listen to a lot of NPR. I love podcasts because of interviews. Sports radio, I love. Listen to the difference between an on-air personality and like a rookie athlete or a man or woman on the street that are getting interviewed. And you can just tell night and day the difference. That professional, that on-air personality, you will almost never hear a filler word.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And that's a great transition to this notion of being a more expressive presenter, bringing your personality or whatever that is. And you talk about speaker personas, and you mentioned Beyonce and Kobe Bryant when he was the Mambo, in Mamba, I think, right?
Black Mamba, yeah.
Black Mamba. And how that was sort of part of the way they psyched themselves up. They had this persona, that there's performance persona. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to that of, almost like you're stepping into a role when you're a presenter. And so Kobe, his persona was Black Mamba. Beyonce, I think it was Sasha Fierce. Beyonce came up singing gospel and in churches. It was a big departure for her to be able to get on stages and being an entertainer. So having that persona, or even like I was talking to a fellow speaker the other day, and she was having some jitters before she went out, and literally she just went in, and this is right out of Ted Lasso. She went in and looked in the mirror and kind of like did a little bit of a power pose, and it just set her on the right track. And sometimes having that persona allows you to get out of your own way. And it may be the persona is someone that who's a speaker that you absolutely enjoy listening to, that I'm going to kind of step into those shoes. But sometimes I feel that really helps you get out of your own way.
By the way, I love the power pose. It is one of the things that I will do. I will go into the bathroom and do a power pose before I speak. There was a startling statistic in your book that words are believed 7% of the time, and that body language equals 55% of a speaker's believability. I'm going to repeat that.
Yeah, so it's called the Morabian effect, after a researcher named Alfred Morabian. And I have to qualify this because a lot of people kind of misstate this. And for my co-author, it's a real thorn in his side. It's not all communication. It's whenever you're communicating something, Drew, with emotion, they say 7% of what's communicated are the words that you use. And to your point, let me do the studio here. It's people are reading your body language. And 55% is your body language when you communicate something with emotion. And the remainder, the 38%, is the tone of your voice. And those 93% of it is not what you say, it's more of how you say it.
So again, this is getting to this notion of practicing and rehearsing and listening to yourself and making sure that we've already covered the fact that you need to be clear about what it is that you're trying to communicate. Now we're talking about the method of communication that you're using. There's some little things that you talked about that not having windows of, where you present, checking out the room, some of the logistical stuff, you use the word facilitate. I think it's important to just remind folks of that. Because even if you're in a conference room, you can choose where in the conference room you sit or stand. And even that, do you sit or stand?
Yeah, I would tell people if 9 out of 10 times, if you can stand, you want to stand. You're just more expressive when you're standing. I tend to think better when I'm on my feet. I don't know if that's a truism, but to your point, I think whenever you present, you want to be able to position yourselves. If you're using slides, you don't want to have people choose between you or your slides. This is my default when I present virtually, because I want to replicate what it would be like if you saw me on the stage. Slides behind me that support what I'm saying visually. And then there are times where the slides don't matter, and I like this because I don't want you to be distracted. But paying attention to the mic that you're using, where is your computer if you're using slides so you have some control. Those few minutes that you can actually prepare and set up are worth their weight in gold.
So, and by the way, both of us are standing here. I stand on for every podcast, and I like to get my hands going. And I know there are some thoughts about hands, but more and more I've been reading about it. You can overdo it because people stop, but it's a good use of expression, right? I mean, there's times where using your hands makes sense.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. Most of us have like the alligator arms. And I'm not talking about like reaching for the check alligator arms, right? But we're glued. We don't let ourselves get a little bit bigger. And one of the things we talk about in the book, Drew, is sometimes on a scale of 1 to 10, we might think, hey, we're going big. And we might think it's an 8 or a 9 in terms of an expression. But that's not what the audience feels.
Yeah.
They may feel it as like a 6 or a 7, maybe. And so we talk about this idea that, like sometimes you just need to go bigger than what you feel because you want to be able to communicate that. And if you can unlock the arms a little bit, if you can use movement to convey what you're trying to communicate, absolutely key.
Right. Although you don't want to be a rocker. That's or someone who just randomly walks from side to side without any intent.
No, you don't want to pace, but you want to move with purpose.
Right. So it's okay to go to you walk 5 feet, stop, look at somebody and speak. And that also buys you time when you're presenting. Good. Okay. A lot of this there is stories involved. Let's talk about what's your go-to story for engaging an audience when talking to them about presenting better.
So the framework that we use in the book, you could go, if you do like the Joseph Campbell hero's journey version of storytelling, like there's 14 elements, right, of that journey. Way too complicated for me. If you want to give your stories life, you just need to simplify them. And if you want to give them life, the technique that we talk is CPR. And CPR is simply every story starts with conflict, right? Something happened. So the C in CPR is challenge. How do you frame the challenge, which took you from the existing state to having to do maybe something different? The P is the plan. So how did you address that challenge? What did you do? And not every story has to be positive. There could be a lot of good learning lessons that you take from it, but you executed some type of plan to address that challenge. And then just the last part of the story, the R in CPR, is results. So what happened? What did we learn as a result of that story? You know, you can tell a story just because it's entertaining, but really, if you want people to remember that central idea and maybe one of those key 3 points, facts tell, stories sell. And so CPR is, to me, is just a real simple method of being able to put together a good story.
Do you have an example?
Yeah, so I'll give you one that I tell all the time. So one of my books is about how important your top 20% of customers and employees are. That not everyone's created equal. And the story, real quick, is about Kraft, and I show a graph on how the sales. And by the way, this is a cheesy case study. It's about Velveeta. That, you know, you look at the graph, and over the course of quarters, it's just diving down to the bottom right. And if you're working at Kraft, you're like, we've got to fix this. And so they started thinking, well, who do we focus on? Because that's such an important thing. And some people said, no, you know, we need to get people who've never tried Velveeta. And maybe we can do like sampling, right, to really kickstart sales. And then some people at Kraft said, no, we need to get the people that are lapsed or occasional buyers to buy more Velveeta. And we can give them coupons, right? We can give them recipes, right? We can really get them re-engaged. And then someone who was really smart there said, maybe we should look at the people who buy Velveeta. And here's the deal, Drew. They found that 10% of the people who buy Velveeta consume over 50% of all Velveeta that's sold. And they said, well, maybe we should talk to these people. And when they talked to them, these people wanted more Velveeta in their lives. They weren't getting enough. They absolutely loved it. And so over the next 18 months, they figured out ways they could put Velveeta into more and more Kraft products. And through line extensions, they developed over $100 million in additional sales and took their sales, I mean, hockey stick up into the right. So that's, if you break that down, what was the challenge? Flagging sales. How did we come up with a plan? And then what was the result?
Talk to customers, sales went up because we got $100 million in, and it is indeed a cheesy story. So, and I love that. So, and one of the things that I think is important in this thing, we've had, one of the conversations that we've had was on videos. And one of the thoughts in videos these days is, you know, you got to get them hooked in the first 7 seconds. You can't literally go and do in an introduction. We're going to talk about this. You got to get right to the meat. And it seems we've also drawn that parallel into speaking in terms of getting into the story. Let's talk just quickly about organizing the stories. And you talked about using sticky notes when you start your outline. Talk a little bit about your method for creating and making sure that that you get one, that is simple, but 2, that it's well organized and thoughtful.
So I think the worst thing that you can do, Drew, is to open up PowerPoint when you're beginning. I like to go analog and little paper. I'm a little old school. I was born back in the 1900s. And I like Post-it notes because I'll start to write just, you know, kind of what are the key things? What's the story? How am I going to open? How am I going to close? What do I want people to do? When am I going to handle questions? How am I going to transition between the 2 or 3 key points? And I just really fast, you know, you can't write a lot. I use a Sharpie. You can't write a lot on a Post-it note with a Sharpie. So it forces you to almost stay really top line. And then I'll take like a wall, right? Or I'll clear out a table and I'll start to go, all right, let's start to put them. This is the beginning of the presentation. And I do rows of like 5 or 6, but it, you know, just, and And I swear to God, it's so easy to move stuff around. I absolutely love it. And then I'll take a picture of it. And only from that point will I open up PowerPoint.
And, it's so true. I think about presentations that I've given over the years. And if I start in PowerPoint, there's just this painful moment of structure and moving things around, and you get locked in too quickly, right? And
You
you just
do.
sort of, you end up putting words on slides because there's space to put words on slides.
Right.
So creating this narrative arc, as you describe it, from start to finish, what's your opening story? What's your closing story? How are you connecting the dots? What is the key takeaways? Makes it a lot easier to
Yeah.
sort of fill in the outline. And again, this is an exercise, like thinking about, you're going to talk to your board of directors, there's one or two things they care about. So obviously you have to address that, but within that, there's either going to be really good things or really bad things, or maybe some things in the middle that are going to sort of give them some insight into the future of where
Right.
you're going. So it feels like even on that presentation, you'd be better off using your sticky note method than you would be going, okay, here are the 15 things that we got to share with the board.
Right. And I'll tell you one thing. I'm gonna give you another Post-it note trick. Because I absolutely love this. So especially, and this is from when you're doing virtual presenting. So I call it, and I didn't phrase this, it's called the turkey tail. Do you remember when your like kids came home from school and they used like a paper plate and they had the tails that came off so this is the same idea. You don't want to be looking down at your notes when you're presenting virtually, but there may be some key things that you want to communicate. And I say, no one's seeing the screen that I'm seeing right now. And what I do is I use those Post-it notes and I put them around the monitor that I have in front of me. And I've got from on the left-hand side, the beginning of the presentation, all the way to the end around the other side of the monitor. And that way, again, I'm not looking down at my notes. Nobody can tell that. Who cares if you're referencing something? It just matters that you want to communicate that key point or get that number right. So that's another hack for doing it.
I just want to remind the folks with us that if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and or put it in chat. Otherwise, I just keep going. I have to ask you a question here because some of this is in the entertainment business, and you know that penguins are the mascot of CMO huddles, and we do like to, have a little fun. How do you feel about attention getting gimmicks like wearing a penguin hat, maybe at the beginning or the end of a presentation? I mean, I'm getting attention. Whether or not it's good attention or not remains to be seen. What's your thoughts?
I do think, slides as visuals are super important. I think if you use props correctly, that they can even be more powerful than images. And the reason being, Drew, is that if we use, and this is the key, something that is proper to the point of what they're hearing, right? You then evoke what's called dual coding. So someone is seeing something, hearing something, and also seeing something that's relevant. And here's the amazing thing. When that dual coding happens, you jump from 10% retention about a week later if it's single coding. I see something or I hear something. But when you mix those two together, that goes from 10% to 65%.
So there's that interlocking connection. By the way, I'm really impressed that you were able to keep a straight face while I'm wearing this. And just to confirm the method to the madness, a group of penguins is called a huddle. And these birds happen to be they work together, they solve problems, they communicate really well. So there is some method to this silliness, but thank you for that little bit of indulgence. So we haven't really have a decision on whether or not I should give a speech with a penguin hat, but it does belong somewhere in this mix. So we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you, speaking of time, when you're giving a presentation at a large conference, let's say, there's the question of you started 15 minutes late, do you end 15 minutes late? How do you sort of manage and decide when to end?
So I tell people there's only one cardinal rule when you speak, and it is you've got to finish on time. And you have to realize, especially if you're at a big event or a conference, that you might be stepping on the exhibitors who've paid good money between the breaks. You might be stepping on someone else's time, like maybe the CEO or someone else. It's just really bad form. So to your point, and I've done an hour-long talk, Drew, where I didn't start because it ran over before like 35 minutes. And if you're truly a professional, you can take that message and distill it down, right? Sometimes that can be difficult if you don't have control over your slides. But I always say you've got to ask the event organizer. And I always just put it to them, hey, I'm happy to put the train back on the tracks. But if you feel we have time to go over, I don't ever want to make the assumption that they wouldn't want me to do my full time. But cardinal rule. And so really good speakers have figured out hacks to be able to finish on time. And there's nothing wrong with finishing a couple minutes ahead of time. But you've got to be able to manage your time in order to be effective.
And so this goes back to where we started the conversation. If you are really well organized and you've simplified the story that you want to tell, the three things that you're trying to communicate, then whether you have 50 minutes, 30 minutes, or 15 minutes, in theory, you can get to, it's really just a question of how much explication you provide, right? How much meat you put on the bones. So in theory, this discipline that we're describing could apply to a board meeting. You started 15 minutes late. You could decide, I'm going to stick with the slides I have and go 15 minutes late. Or because you've already thought about really the top three things you're trying to communicate, you can streamline it. One last thing that you noted in terms of finishing and allowing yourself time, I noticed this idea and I really thought about it before, which is if there is going to be a Q&A, do the Q&A before your big close.
Absolutely. You know what? And we have no excuse because I was a marketer for 20 years. And of all people, we should know this. We know primacy and we know recency. People remember the first thing they hear. Again, that's why the first 6 words out of your mouth are so important. And I also tell people you should know the last 6 words out of your mouth, right? Because those last 6 words should never be, oh, I see there's no more questions. Right? That's not what you want people remembering is the last thing. What you want to do is finish strong with maybe a strong closing story or insight, and then you want to give them a call to action. What do you want people to do as a result of having just listened to you? And I think so many people do themselves a disservice by simply putting Q&A at the end and losing control over the last thing that people hear.
So we've finished strong. We told a story that summarizes and everything, and it's memorable, and that's the thing they could remember. But if we go back to it and you say, okay, there's a call to action, there's one call to action, right? And this is where defining what it is you're trying to do when you're presenting is so important. We're trying to persuade because I want a budget approval. That's the one action. So approve the budget, right? Or you want them to buy your book. Okay, well then get them there, or get them to hire you for another speaking event, whatever it is. You need to be very clear on that. And and I think that we could probably apply that to almost any meeting. If you have a clear agenda, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, it's going to be a much better meeting. And the same goes for presenting. Okay, so let's do this. Other than wearing a penguin hat, if your logo is a penguin, please offer B2B CMOs 2 do's and 1 don't for giving better presentations and more persuasive presentations.
So the 2 to-dos would be 1, start analog for your next presentation. That would be my one to do. Really craft, be intentional about how you open, how you close, what's your call to action, what's the central idea, right? And what's maybe upwards of 3 things that support that central idea. The second thing I would say is, if there's a difference between practice and rehearsal. People think they're the same thing. No, you practice key elements of your speech or your presentation. And just like a basketball player will practice free throws or layups, because those are key things that can swing a game, right? We need to think about practicing the first 2 minutes of our talk and the last 2 minutes of our talk. And so that would be my second to do, is realize you don't have to go through your talk 8 times and know it back to front. Sure, you want to rehearse maybe once, but you want to practice the beginnings and the endings.
Those are the do's. And the don't, one don't.
Don't go over time. That would be that again. That's the only cardinal rule.
Right. Right.
And I would think, look, there's a reason. I always say I went to law school. So one of the favorite things I learned in law school is there's a reason behind every rule. And so I can tell you things to do or not to do, but when the reason for you to either do it or not do it supersedes the rule, then don't feel constrained by the rule. But I would tell you there's only one cardinal rule that's non-negotiable: finish on time.
Got it. Now I want to go back to make a comment about the practice and the difference between practice and rehearsal. And it's funny, I'm listening to this book right now on influencer. And when you think about great free throw shooters, they're not just practicing saying, I'm going to make 10 in a row. They're focused on a technique, a motion, a thing, so that they can isolate whether it's their wristband or their arm or where the ball is starting. So when you're practicing, you're really practicing, how loud are you talking? You're talking your expressions. What's the moment? You're practicing your pauses. You're practicing all of the things that are going to make this a little bit more effective. And you keep practicing. And what I love about your notion is I'm not practicing an hour. I'm practicing that first 2 minutes and the last 2 minutes. So it's really helpful.
It's like flying a plane. They say there's only 2 really important times when you're flying a plane.
Yeah. Taking off and landing.
Taking off and landing. Very rarely will people remember or really be notable what you say in the middle. There may be a peak there, right? Some would say there's a peak end rule. Like they might remember one peak from the middle of the talk and then what you said at the end. But I'm telling you, you want to make sure you're airtight on how you take off and how you land the plane.
Otherwise you could crash and burn, and that's bad. Okay. So Stan, thank you for joining us. Where can people find you and what should they hire you for?
You can find me at stanphelps.com. So keep it real simple, first and last name.com. And the work that I do, again, I come from it from a marketer's point of view. I believe your brand is no longer what you tell people it is. It's the experience that you provide. It's how your employees feel about delivering that experience and what you stand for. And most importantly, it's what your customers and employees tell others about their experience. So everything that I do is kind of around the customer experience, the employee experience, and the brand experience.
And so you do speaking and consulting on both of those areas.
I do predominantly keynotes and workshops. Yes.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you, Stan.